Hello everyone, McGee here with another draft battle analysis video and recap, this time covering my Week 6 match in the XPDLA, in which I am fighting Dank Dr. Phil, or otherwise known as CameronRob, and the Massachusetts Monkey Masters, I believe it is. Triple M, I can't remember if I got the adjectives right, but that's the name. So I'm looking to get a continued strong start and go 6-0. CameronRob has also had a very strong season so far, going 4-1 up to this point, with really strong play from his Arctozolt, which overall leads the league in KOs. It's a very difficult mon to address if you have the right support pieces. Obviously, having Hail is a requirement, but its combination of electric and ice plus the access to freeze dry just really shuts down a lot of things that would normally be able to handle it and leaves you with very few defensive options to switch in and address it. So, you will see in my team prep that I tried my best to account for as many variants of it as possible while still having answers to the rest of his team, but that was one of the most obvious concerning things going in. But before we dive into the match, we're going to take a look at the team he had available to him and then the pieces I brought to try and address that. So he's got the Megalopony, very strong physical presence. It can tear a team apart, has access to U-turn this generation, fake out, return, close combat, or high jump kick. Just a really strong mon that can do massive damage and pivot out pretty freely. Fake out always is a nuisance, especially if you don't have reliable ways to heal. Hoopa Unbound, really strong wall breaker, really scary for its ability to run band or just be a mix set because it has a better special attack stat than it does an attack stat. So trying to simply address it on the physical front can obviously have a negative impact if it brings a mixed special set as well. Ferrothorn, offensively not a concern. Its defensive prowess and its hazard setting is always going to be the primary thing to have to address. Gyro Ball against several members of my team is just horrifying, specifically Mega Diancie and Dracopult, just because of their speed stats and their weakness to steel. Moltres, again, not too concerning of an offensive presence, just its ability to address a couple of things. Not super worried about it here in this matchup, just because it has an awful time against Mega Diancie, but still something I am wary of. Alola Ninetales, pretty much required to come if he's going to bring Arctozolt, and Arctozolt overall has a good matchup against me, so it made full sense the Alola Ninetales would be there. Not overly concerned about its offensive potential, aware of the fact it could carry either a Scarf and Hidden Power Steel to try to surprise Diancie and get a one-hit KO, so something I'm aware of and trying to be careful towards. Vaporeon, again, not an offensive threat, but its wish support ability is always very scary. Arctozolt, obviously the scariest member on his team. I am trying my very best to address its combination of attacks. I know pretty much without a doubt it's going to be running Icicle, Crash, Bolt Beak, Freeze Dry, and then Stone Edge, because otherwise Rotom actually could stand in the way, but with Stone Edge, Rotom is no longer a strong answer. So no surprise on what four moves it's going to want to bring. It's just my ability to try to address those. Zygarde has a couple of scary sets. I am obviously not very well equipped to deal with Thousand Arrows. Some of my nice immunities, specifically Skarmory, are entirely shut down by Zygarde and can be run right through. Same with the Rotom Heat. So it's going to require me to lean into some of my resists, of which I don't have very many, primarily Shaman. Dusclops, not scared of its potential at all, really. Just slap a Toxic on it and get it out of the way, but it could cause some trouble. Mr. Rhyme, Freeze Dry is always scary, but its speed tier is terrible, so I'm not too worried about it. And then Stonjourner, I have so many viable special attackers that Stonjourner just has the worst time. It's the rock type with the lowest special defense stat, so I'm just not particularly worried about its potential, but I guess it exists as an option. So the pieces I brought to try to address this, Dracopult unfortunately has to run a Scarf again because it is possible for my opponent to run a Jolly or Naive or some kind of speed nature Arctozolt, which would outspeed max speed Dragapult. So I'm forced to lean into that Scarf because it seems like a thing he would try and creep. But I'm able to go modest and I don't have to go a ton of speed investment. So I'm able to have a lot of HP to play with as well. Infiltrator, because it gets behind Aurora Veil, so the boosts from Aurora Veil aren't relevant for Dragapult with Infiltrator. Draco Meteor to try to nuke things. Flamethrower, specifically for Arctozolt, Ferrothorn, and Alolan Ninetales. Shadow Ball, I believe just good strong stab. He doesn't have a lot of resist, so that's nice to have. And then Thunderbolt, just to have a strong way to force out Vaporeon and Moltres. Diancie, opting for, again, a Rock Polish set because it has the ability to sweep after I get rid of Vaporeon, but getting rid of Vaporeon is always the struggle. Power Gem, Moonblast, Mystical Fire hit everything for neutral or super effective damage. And then pretty much at 252, 252, have a little bit to play with just because I'm trying to only outspeed Alolan Ninetales, who I am wary might carry Hidden Power Steel, so I need to make sure I outspeed it. Otherwise, I wouldn't be so worried about it. Skarmory has two different ways to address Arctozolt here. Body Press in case it isn't behind a veil, which will do a lot of damage. Counter in case it is behind the veil, so that I can counter back the Bolt Beak with the Wakan Berry and then do massive damage. Roost and Spikes because his team doesn't like spike stacking, especially if he's not in a comfortable spot to bring the Moltres, which I don't expect he will bring just because Dracopult, Diancie, and Rotom all address it pretty well, as does Gastrodon, so it's just a really hard match for Moltres to show up to. Rotom Heat, mostly defensive here, just as a strong check to, uh, again, Arctozolt, because Arctozolt is just a really big threat to my team. I make a decision I do regret in hindsight, and I did intend to change before the battle started. I meant to go back to heavy duty boots. I had toyed around with leftovers and heavy duty boots, but I ultimately should have opted for the heavy duty boots because I don't immediately address Ferrothorn, especially if it brings the Fireberry option, Akaberry. And so I just needed to have better protection to be able to pivot around with the Rotom Heat. And I regret not bringing a heavy duty boot set because if I'm not able to pivot around freely, Rotom falls apart very quickly in the match. Just a little bit of special attack investment, and then speed investment was, I believe, to outpace uninvested Moltres. So if Moltres didn't run any speed at all and it shows up, then Rotom Heat would outspeed it. Shaman, Choice Scarf set, because I want to be able to outspeed Arctozolt. There's a theme going on here where every piece has to have a way to address Arctozolt so that Arctozolt doesn't do anything freely against any of my pieces. Because Dragapult outspeeds, Diancie uh, would outspeed if an Arctozolt came in on it, just because Diancie would either click Rock Polish or maybe not Mega Evolve yet, so it just has strong defensive prowess at that point. Either way, able to handle Arctozolt. Skarmory with the counter or the body press, Rotom with the typing and the overheat, Shaman with the speed to outspeed it. Seed Flare just does a lot to his team. I debate between Hidden Power Rock and Hidden Power Fire. I'm unsure of which Mon is going to show up between Moltres and Ferrothorn. Ultimately, I probably should have gone Hidden Power Fire just because Ferrothorn is a stronger overall bring to get rocks up and make my pivots uncomfortable. Dazzling Gleam just to be able to hit a couple of things for decent damage, namely the Zygarde, and then Earth Power, which is a good super effective option for the Arctozolt, just so I have a good way to hit it for super effective damage. And then finally, there is the Gastrodon, going with the Yachi Berry because Freeze Dry would otherwise decimate Gastrodon, and I'm aware of that. Pretty much max HP, mostly max defense, and then some investment in special defense, enough to feel comfortable about Freeze Dry hitting, and then surviving and killing it pretty much with Earth Power. Toxic, just for a couple of other things, Recover, and then Ice Beam so that I can always reliably address Zygarde and it can't set up. I just need to make sure Zygarde's not in a position to set up on Gastrodon, especially if it tries to go for a sub Coil set or a sub Dragon Dance set. Ice Beam really keeps that in check. So that's the team I brought. That's generally what I was looking to address with those members and how my game plan was aimed at being. More or less, it was aimed at getting some hazards on the field, having a lot of strong answers to the Arctozolt, and then ultimately being able to clean up with the combination again of Dragapult and Diancie, or Shaman if I could get rid of the Ferrothorn or any resists to the Seed Flare. He starts spamming Seed Flare and things start breaking. So when I'm looking at the team he brought, really no large surprises. I wasn't sure if Moltres or Ferrothorn would come. I knew one of them was going to show up. I wasn't 100% sure Vaporeon would show up, but it seemed like a solid enough bring. And so I'm not overly surprised that there. Otherwise, there's no surprises in this team preview. Looking at it, I'm going to opt, I believe, for a Shaman lead. That's what I go. Or Rotom Heat, I'm sorry. So I go let me go back a turn. I go Rotom Heat here, and I do kind of regret it in the end. I don't think he's going to lead Zygarde. I consider the fact he might lead Alolan Ninetales, or he might lead Ferrothorn for hazards, or maybe Mega Lopunny, but I'm in a better position to address more things with Rotom Heat than I am if I lead Skarmory, because if he leads Alola Ninetales and I lead Skarmory, I'm forced out. If he leads Zygarde, I lead Skarmory, I'm forced out. And I don't like either of those chances because I don't want to give Zygarde too much of a window to do anything. And so I like the Rotom Heat lead a little more. Can't stay on a Mega Lopunny though, so I'm forced straight into Skarmory, which is fine. Not the end of my world. Fake Out's not going to do anything. I can heal in front of it if I needed to, but I'm going to opt to get some spikes on. I do something I regret on turn 3, which is I flee. I really think I should play the hazard battle with the Ferrothorn, because what I'm afraid of here is being knocked off and losing my Wakanberry, and so I'm going to run away out of concern that he's going to take my berry, and I really want to have that berry for this match. So I flee to Rotom Heat here just because I'm scared of what it's going to do. I know he's going to switch out, so clicking Overheat isn't worth it. And I'm going to go instead for Will-O-Wisp, because Will-O-Wisp he doesn't enjoy. If Alola Ninetales comes in, it's probably his safest switch in. Nothing else really wants to come in on the Will-O-Wisp. Unfortunately, he prepped ahead for that, and he does bring a Lumberry so that his Zygarde is able to address it. Unfortunate for me, forces Gastrodon back into play. Again, Gastrodon's really built to handle this. Ice Beam is going to address it right away. I'm going to keep recovering here because I don't want to give his Arctozolt a free window to come in and kill Gastrodon, because once my health gets low enough, it could do that. And so I'm just going to keep breaking these subs and putting its health down. Gastrodon's going to get its health back to full here and then get forcibly put out. And this is where my opponent starts doing some clever things that I really haven't had enough experience with in this league so far, is where he's going to really start aggressively calling some of my switch arounds. Obviously, he knows I can't stay in with the Gastrodon against the Ferrothorn here because it has Power Whip potential, and I'm not in a position to address that. So I obviously have to flee to Rotom or something else, maybe Skarmory. Either way, he's in a position to call that with Zygarde on a hard call, which he does. So Zygarde gets back in here for free. Rotom gets pretty much forced out. He's going to call it yet again that I'm forced out. Really unfortunate, or he doesn't call it, I'm sorry. But he gets a crit, puts Gastrodon in a spot where Gastrodon has to heal. And then he comes in with Alola Ninetales. Again, Gastrodon can't sit in on Alola Ninetales. He can easily make that call, and he knows I'm going to go right back into Rotom again. So you've seen in 14 turns already, I've already lost so much health from Rotom because I've had to pivot around, and it's been really unfortunate. I'm forced in it with Skarmory again because that's my safe call. He can fake out because it's pretty safe for him to click overall. He probably could have 2-hit with close combat, depending on his investment, but I guess he didn't want to go for that call. Gives Skarmory a chance to get health back up. And then I believe at this point I'm going to start spike stacking because that's in my advantage. Yeah, so I go for some spike stacking at this point because that seems more the more logical thing to do, just to put a lot of his things on timers. He comes in with Arctozolt, and so I'm going to do a really greedy thing that is going to really bite me here. Body Press doesn't one-hit KO. Even if it's a negative defense nature, and I believe it is, I don't. Body Press isn't in a position to one-hit KO this Arctozolt just because it has a good HP stat and it has a good overall defense stat. And so the Body Press was a good way to do damage, but it wasn't a surefire way to kill. Counter seemed like a solid way to kill. I don't think it's in a position to kill me with Bolt Beak at this health range with the Wakanberry. So I feel that if he goes for Bolt Beak and I survive that like I intend to with that berry, then the counter is going to do a lot of damage. But it's an unnecessary risk. I don't need to take it. More than anything, what I should be doing is putting uh, this Arctozolt in a position where it can't come back in, because if I body press it, it's probably low enough at that point where it can't come back in due to the hazards on the field. But he freeze dries, and I can't counter freeze dry because freeze dry isn't a physical move. So I've now lost Skarmory for nothing. It's back to full health. Really unnecessary risk by me. Really unfortunate. And so I come in with Shaman because, again, I'm scarfed. I can force it out. I'm not going to be one-hit KO'd, I don't believe, by its attacks. And so I can pretty safely click Seed Flare. Unfortunate that it lives. It just makes Shaman lose an extra 6% of health because now it has to eat 2 turns of Hail. But it's off the field now, and now he's running out of Hail turns for the Arctozolt to be truly threatening. Again, he's called my obvious switch in with Rotom. super unfortunate. I don't have a lot of mobility options there. He's just been really good with those calls all game and forcing my rotom in. So it's just really, really unfortunate that I decided not to carry heavy duty boots because if I did, then I'm not scared of any of these hard calls that Ferrothorn makes. I'm just pivoting around freely, but now I'm losing a bunch of health by all this pivoting. So it was a really regrettable mistake by me to choose leftovers over heavy duty boots in a potential rematch in the future. Obviously, this is something I would not want to do, but it's really biting me in this match. And so, at this point, he just needs to hit the Stone Edge. There's a 20% chance it misses, obviously, and then I'm able to click Overheat and get the KO. Doesn't happen. So this turn, he clicks Freeze Dry here. I expected he would click Freeze Dry. Earth Power is in a position to KO it at this range, and I'm aware of that. And so all I need to do is survive the Freeze Dry, and I have a Yachi Berry, so I feel pretty good about my chances here. But he crits, and the critical hit is absolutely brutal because it's going to KO me. I'm going to lose all my health. And the wild thing about that is, so he crits, there's a 4% chance a move is going to crit. So like a 1 in 25% chance the move hits a critical. The wild thing is I still have an 81% chance of surviving on a critical hit. It has to high roll the critical hit with Freeze Dry for the Gastrodon to go down at that health range. I went and reviewed the calcs. That was the only time I got really in depth on a calc in this match, was reviewing that. And it was just super, super unfortunate that he high rolls a critical hit. It's the second time this season the Arctozolt has managed to critical hit a Freeze Dry on a water ground type to get the KO. So this Arctozolt is just blessed by some RNG. Super unfortunate that I lose Gastrodon there because Gastrodon was in a position to get rid of that. I'm able to come in with Dragapult and click Drago Meteor, which is fine. I get the KO, but the thing is, now I am at 0.5 special attack and I'm forced to switch out. It gives my opponent some mobility to do things now. Really not ideal. I'm going to come in with Shaman because that's the best piece I have to address most of what Horion wants to do. I'm going to click Seed Flare, or I'm sorry, Earth Power, expecting a switch out or a hard switch out to Ferrothorn because it would have died or may have died at that combination. He's going to wish again. Obviously, I'm not in a great spot to address this Ferrothorn anymore, and I know the Ferrothorn's coming in, and he can flip turn freely now because I lost the Gastrodon. So lots of unfortunate things kind of pairing up. I know he probably has Akaberry. I've known in this whole match it's probably Akaberry that he's carrying, just because if I try to Mystical Fire with Diancie, it'll easily survive the Mystical Fire and then KO me back with Gyro Ball or Iron Head or whatever steel attack it wants to hit me with. Same thing with Dragapult, where it can Gyro Ball, or in this case, it's about to T-Wave me for free because it's going to survive. I knew it was very likely to carry this item. I just wasn't a lot I could do, especially after I lost my Skarmory in this match already. At this position, I'm much better off to just be clicking Seed Flare. I need to make sure he has no safe switch-ins. I know pivoting at Ferrothorn costs him 25% of health to do it. I should maybe be more aggressively hard calling this. If I had hard called this and switched into my my Dragonite, my Diancie on the expected hard switch to Ferrothorn, I'd be in a better overall position. But I'm a little tilted from what happened with my Gastrodon a few turns back, and it's really affecting my gameplay on this back end. I've already done poor math in my head that I think the Seed Flare can now kill with the special defense drop, but it's only going to do maybe 16 to 18%, not enough to kill this Ferrothorn. So now I've stood in with Shaman for no reason at all. When going into going into Dragapult was a smarter play just to throw away Dragapult at this point in the game because now that he's paralyzed, he's not in a position to address either Zygarde or Mega Lopunny anymore, so he's just really useless, and I should be throwing him away because Shaman still has some use and value in this game. But I'm going to essentially throw it away for nothing because I get the KO here. Or I don't get the KO. I get it weak here, but it was always weak enough where Diancie could have KO'd it. I just don't take advantage of that. Mystical Fire here because it's the smart call. So another unfortunate thing about this match is that the Zygarde is able to come in and survive on 1 health. Why this matters is because he now forces me to Dynamax because I need to outspeed the Zygarde now. If the Zygarde would have insta-died to the spikes, then I'm in a position with Diancie to be able to safely click Rock Polish on something. Either the Vaporeon that comes in and tries to do some kind of water attack flip turn shenanigans or the Megalopony, I can just Moonblast freely and not even without even Dynamaxing, I can stay in defensive form and click Moonblast freely on the Megalopony. Either way, really unfortunate for me because Zygarde's able to come in. It forces me to Dynamax, which makes my defensive stats not good anymore. Perhaps I should have had, if I had had maybe Diamond Storm over Power Gem, this might have been more relevant here, and that could have actually saved me because a 50% chance I get a double defense boost. That could have actually put me in a strong position to manage this Lopunny because it's going to go for fake out, easy free damage. And then now I'm in easy range for close combat. Whereas before, I was in a better spot with I was in a better spot if I could have stayed in defensive form. The calc was there to survive a close combat, and unfortunately, I don't have that calc to work with anymore. So I'm in a bad spot now. Dragapult's not going to outspeed this Lopunny, so it's game over. Unfortunately, so there was a couple of earlier misplays by me that threw away some of my defensive core pieces. My Skarmory misplayed what it should have done. It should have body pressed instead of trying to go for counter. I got greedy, very bad cost. My Rotom Heat should have been heavy duty boots. I went leftovers trying to be greedy for health. It backfired and it didn't pay off. I did nothing wrong with my Gastrodon other than getting really, really bad RNG where it criticaled, high rolled. Can't control that. Entirely out of my control. In 99.5% of matches I would play, if we were to repeat this, the Gastrodon survives that turn, KOs the Arctozolt, and then I'm in better control to address the next piece that comes in rather than the position I was put in. So just very unfortunate overall right there. But he played a very strong game. He made some very smart calls on some of my obvious switch arounds. And these are things that just haven't been brought to my attention in any of the matches so far this season. Not so much where opponents are aggressively hard calling what my obvious plays need to be and then using it to create favorable scenarios for them. So he did a really good job of controlling the pace of that match for a long time. My spike stacking was definitely impacting his play. Him not bringing Moltres was definitely hurting him in that match. I just lost too many defensive pieces too early on misplays that he was able to break me before I was able to wear him down with my hazards. Obviously, I brought up all the scenarios I would have changed in a rematch. I think this was a very close match, and I was in positions to win it a couple of times, but he played smart plays, and I didn't take full advantage of some of the situations that were present for me. So ultimately, he's able to give me my first loss of the season. I still maintain number one overall seed just because of it's decided first by differential. My differential so far this season has been very strong, but now he is in a spot to overtake me as the season goes on. So I'm going to hopefully come back next week, get a strong win to again get my season back on track and try to close out strong. I'm still aiming for one of the top two seeds because that gives you a first round bye. So if I can do all of that, I'm in a strong spot. But the first loss was inevitable, and he brought a very strong team to give it to me. So kudos to him, and I will be back next time.